all CEOs, me included, we don't actually know what we're doing.
They're all sharks, so all you got to do, though, is know shark behavior.
I don't think we've ever talked about this before.
We can capture all of the wallet share.
First place you start is with the product.
That's just the first note.
This is the Capital Stack. Hey, everybody. This is David Paul, the host of the Capital Stack podcast, where I talk to founders, operators, and investors about all things value creation in startups. Today, I am talking to Matthew Pittinsky, the godfather of educational technology. He is the founder, was the co-founder and of Blackboard, which is the original LMS that hit the markets back in the 90s and pretty much paved the way to the LMS industry. Since then, he has sold that company after taking it taking it public, and now is the founder and CEO of Parchment. Matt, how you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
I am super excited to have you. Would love to understand a little bit more about your backstory and how you got into trying to solve technology issues within education.
Happy to. And you were very kind with my introduction. You might have given me a little bit of a promotion, so I'll also set the record straight. But I did co-found Blackboard in 1997. My background is education. I went to college to be a social studies teacher and somehow found my way, instead of going into the classroom, into the world of education policy. And so after graduating with my master's degree, I started doing consulting with KPMG Consulting with universities and found myself largely focused on helping them set up the big administrative systems that run any enterprise, but higher ed included. So the PeopleSofts of the world that run HR and finance and so on. And it occurred to me that universities were investing millions and millions of dollars in their administrative computing and investing millions of dollars in their networks. So back then, before Wi-Fi was too prevalent, it was a port per pillow or 2 ports for every dorm room. And there was no software that made that useful for teaching and learning. So here, the whole point of a school and university is instruction. And so much of their technology investment was on hardware and administrative computing. So that was sort of the genesis of the idea for Blackboard. What would it look like to have, in essence, a front office system for universities, software that would help faculty deliver instruction? And we went off to the races, which we can talk about.
Let's talk about a 0 to 1 innovation. I used Blackboard in high school as well as college, and now LMS is pretty much table stakes for corporations, educational systems, training. What was the initial wedge that you felt was the key to unlock, the rest of this platform?
Yeah, and that's where I always want to be careful, because I personally don't believe in the idea of an original idea. So everything builds on everything. Right. And at the time we started Blackboard, there was a wonderful professor, Murray Goldberg, who had created a tool called WebCT. There were early efforts, but what they were largely focused on is they were kind of like authoring tools for instructors who didn't know HTML but wanted to create a class website. So I think our big innovation was less figuring out that the internet would be used for instruction and there would need to be a system. And it was more recognizing that this wasn't a kind of one-off marginal activity, and it wasn't an authoring tool for individual faculty, but instead that it really was a university-wide system and a bunch of application capabilities beyond just the kind of creation of the course website. So without getting too into the weeds about Blackboard. So there was definitely something in the air about the internet and instruction and early adopting faculty wanting to use it. I think where we made the leap was believing that one day every school and every university and almost every course would involve the web in the instructional process, and you would need more of an enterprise system as opposed to kind of a individual desktop authoring type tool.
And by then, was the student information system, the back office platform that you spoke of, was it considered a pretty mature product?
I think so. I mean, this is pre-cloud, and ironically, many SISs are still pre-cloud. They're still on-premise. But yeah, the student information system is a critical system, handles scheduling and student records and all the things you need to administratively run a place. But it's not the point of an institution. The point of an institution is teaching and learning, and to a certain extent, research and service. So it felt to us that there was this disconnect. And in fact, if you visited many universities, the IT organization was very skewed towards the people that ran the servers and the network. They were kind of at the top of the pecking order. Next down would be the people that ran the administrative applications. Academic computing, not to put it down, but was sort of like the overhead carts that would come in if you were going to show a movie. I mean, it wasn't quite like that, but academic computing was definitely the lowest status part of technology. Now, if you visit a university, odds are most CIOs came out of academic computing. That's how much of a transformation higher ed has gone through in terms of using technology for teaching and learning, and then also for retention and lots of other activities beyond just administrative computing. Because
that's essentially showcasing their work product, their courses, their curriculum, how they're delivering it to the students, what kind of experience the students are having. So I could see how it really changed the scripts. I'm fascinated with platform shifts, especially lately when we're in a world where it seems most things are digitized, and we're in an era that cloud companies have become huge, especially vertical SaaS companies. So do you feel like the LMS shift, I know early days, I believe Blackboard was on-prem and then eventually moved to the cloud. Do you feel like do you feel like the LMS movement or the emerging of the market was because student information systems were still on-prem and you kind of had this availability and the timing was really great to be able to scale into the market with a solution that is scalable? And I guess second part of the question is do you feel like there's another platform opportunity within education?
Yeah, I think looking back, in many ways, Blackboard was the victim of platform shift as opposed to the beneficiary of it. So we certainly benefited, and I personally benefited coming of age, as the internet was impacting lots of different verticals, right? And I was just lucky enough to be in education and, with my co-founders to be able to think about and be part of how the internet impacts teaching and learning. Born, the old saying, born a decade earlier, a decade later, who knows whether that opportunity would have been available. But we were on-prem because, the cloud wasn't a concept. I don't think bandwidth, I don't think the compute services were there. You think of Blackboard then as, which it was, server software on-prem as an enterprise application, but it was different than a lot of enterprise applications in that students are using it every single day. Mm-hmm. Students are taking, 30 students are in an assessment, hitting submit at the same time. In our heyday, Blackboard was probably one of the most, visited websites if it had been, a single site, just given the level of adoption, the level of usage. But we were on-prem, and it wasn't really until Instructure, one of Blackboard's competitors, came out with the Canvas LMS. They really doubled down on the cloud shift. And I think one reason why they were a very effective competitor to Blackboard was taking out all the software, having a more scalable, centrally managed, rapidly innovative platform. So Blackboard was kind of a victim of that as opposed to a beneficiary.
And so did any SIS try to build onto the LMS functionality, or were they just too stodgy?
So it's interesting. The owner of Blackboard now, so we built Blackboard through a bunch of venture rounds, including strategic financing, from Microsoft and Dell and AOL and Pearson. We then went public in 2004, and then a private equity firm acquired the company in late 2010, early 2011. But now that private equity firm has sold Blackboard to a company called Anthology. And the big idea of Anthology is exactly where you're going, which is, wouldn't it be nice if you had a single provider for both the student information system and the learning management system, and you could have an end-to-end solution? I personally don't believe in that. I personally think that the kind of user experience expertise you need, the kind of workflow expertise you need, the kind of domain expertise you need in things like financial aid and scheduling, and those kinds of things are just very different from the kind of user experience and expertise you need around teaching and learning. So trying to think of analogies, but just as Salesforce and NetSuite are two different companies, I think, and there's value in integration and you want to get the integration right. I don't see a world in which there's one system to rule them all. I think front office academic computing, back office administrative computing are their own thing.
Yeah, not everything needs to be bundled.
Not everything needs to be bundled, and companies have to be good at things. Right. And it's hard to be good at everything. And particularly the SIS is, in some sense, a more mature category. But even that's changing, right? I mean, imagine going through something like course registration now. Like when you and I did it, you'd get a catalog and you'd have to kind of figure out what you needed to take for your degree major. And maybe you'd ask some people if they took the professor. Now move into a world where you can go in and it's immediately done the degree audit. It knows exactly the courses you need to take. It's looked at your prior academic performance and it's starting to recommend particular sections, particular courses. It's telling you that if you took this course, you'd also be getting credit against this degree major if you were to change degrees. It's just, so the SIS is going through a lot of change, but it's still a lot more mature. The LMS, I think, has a lot of opportunity for innovation. I don't think you want one company doing both.
Yeah. I remember you used to have to get an advisor. You had to book a time with your advisor and they had to pull out the booklet and then interpret for you. I was always too drunk to do it myself. I needed, some kind of help.
Fair enough.
College was crazy. Okay. So so tell me about Parchment and tell me about the transition into Parchment.
Yeah, so Parchment is something that I started to think a little bit about at Blackboard. So at Blackboard, we were about bringing education online, creating the course website, supporting students still going to campus, classes every day, or maybe pure virtual online distance learning. But at the end of the day, what you graduate with is your credential, right? You graduate with a transcript, you graduate with a diploma, certificate. Nowadays, there's things called digital badges, but you graduate with the credential. And it's the credential, if it's a high school degree, that's going to be the key to college admissions. If it's your university transcript, it's going to be the key to credit transfer if you're going to change colleges. And, your college degree is critical to getting jobs, to getting into graduate school. It's the credential. And as much as technology was changing teaching and learning, it wasn't changing the credential. The credential was still this paper-based symbolic thing. Even transcripts are just courses and credits and grades. It says very little about what people know and how well they know it. And in addition, people earn many credentials throughout their lives, right? You're going to earn your high school credential in your college, and you may go to graduate school, but then once you're in the workforce, you're going to be licensed. You're going to get certificates and certifications. And there was really no such thing as a credential account, a place where you could collect and manage your academic and professional credentials in one place as you progress through your education and training journey. So the whole idea of Parchment was to solve that problem, to give schools and universities and professional organizations the ability to issue credentials digitally as machine-readable data, ideally, to make those credentials better representations of learning and competency and skills, so to make them much higher fidelity records, and to allow individuals, because it's digital and because there's a network of these issuers that you're going to interact with, allow individuals to create a Parchment account and collect and manage their credentials each time along their journey that they earn them. And so you could see hopefully how that would relate to an LMS, but it was different enough from Blackboard that we never pursued it there. And so after a brief stint as an academic, I kind of got the bug to go after it. And I cheated, which we can talk about how, but I cheated a little bit. But that was back in 2011, actually. And so it's been 13 years this month.
How'd you cheat?
Actually. I cheated by not starting from scratch.
Got it.
So I cheated by coming across a company called DocuFied in LA that I could see in many ways had started down the path that I imagined Parchment could be. And so I invested, the original venture investors in Blackboard joined me. We renamed it Parchment, moved it here to Phoenix, to Scottsdale specifically, and have been building on it ever since.
That's amazing. So you did something that most founders say that they're going to do, in their early stage pitch decks. And as an investor, reading these pitch decks makes a lot of sense, is you're making a single pane of glass, a networked system of record, where you're digitizing certifications, paper-based transcripts, ... and the K through 12 issuers are using the product, the students are using the product, and the universities are using the product. That's 3 products that you have to be able to identify product market fit for, 3 different stakeholders. How did you go about doing that? Because I don't know many companies in any vertical that have successfully been able to do that.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for appreciating that. If you grab someone at Parchment, which you probably shouldn't grab them, but if you talk to someone at Parchment, they will tell you that one of the things we talk about in orientation is that Parchment can be a really difficult place to work. And I explained the reason why Parchment can be a difficult place to work is not because people are difficult or we have a great culture. It's because most companies at our size and stage, so our financials are a little bit public because we announced our sale to Instructure, and we're a little bit over 100 million in revenue. But throughout our journey to that point, most companies of our size and stage have one product in one market that they're looking to dominate or create the category and dominate. And there's a certain kind of organizing focus that oneness brings to you, right? We're all rowing in the same direction. We're all about, like a Blackboard. We just wanted to prove the LMS market was enterprise, and then we wanted to win more than our fair share of the LMS market. And that kept us super, super busy up until, interestingly, around 100 million in revenues, a little bit small, around 75 million of revenues. And then at Blackboard, we started to look at the next product and kind of where do we go? But Parchment from the beginning, exactly as you described it, we had to be a K-12. We actually started in K-12. So to be a high school issuer, you need to have a university admissions receiving experience. And then because our mission was about the learner collecting and managing their credentials, we had to sell enterprise software or SaaS to school districts, but make sure that our contracts and our product experience gave us direct relationships with the learner, right? So you as a high school had all sorts of settings and features and preferences, but you didn't get to tell us that the learner can't at a different school have a different experience. And so we were B2B to C. That's really hard. In terms of the question of how do you do it? Gosh, I'm not sure there's a single answer, but a lot of it was mission-based, coming back to the problem that we're trying to solve. And the reason why it's a difficult problem to solve is because to really solve it well, you have to have multiple products in multiple markets from the start. And what we're trying to do is optimize for one stakeholder, which was the consumer, the learner. And by having the learner as our North Star, so I would, not to over answer the question, but I would visit a counselor's. And one counselor in particular said, I love Parchment because once a month I can log in, I can see all my transcript requests. Students aren't lining up at my desk. I can charge fees online. I have no petty cash. and it gets sent electronically, I can know that it was downloaded. There's no cost printing and mailing. Can you figure out the problem in that statement? It's once a month.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she didn't sign up to be an Uber driver. She signed up for an enterprise software, to solve the problem of the high school issuing transcripts. But for us to deliver a B2B2C experience, we can't have students ordering transcripts online and then a month later get the email confirmation that it's been sent, right? They're going to call our support. They're going to call the college. So optimizing for the best collective experience is really difficult, but it also became the North Star of the company.
So you basically took one of the shareholders and you leaned in heavily into that to make sure that universally that was the North Star, as you said, and then basically built off the receiving end. What about the K through 12 issuers? Was that a cultural battle trying to get them to digitize and to adopt the platform?
Not as much, because K-12, first off, just very resource constrained. So not having to print and mail. There was just a bunch of reasons why it was operationally better. Plus, most K-12 transcripts are going to college admissions offices. So the network value proposition that we have, over 80% of admissions offices, now it's probably over 90%, able to receive through Parchment, all of that just made a ton of sense. And they're a little less proprietary over the learner because they recognize that they're going on to college and so on. Higher ed issuing, that was a challenge, where many universities are used to, because they're bigger price tag, they're used to telling the SaaS provider, these are the terms. You're going to be white labeled, or we're going to turn off this feature or turn on that feature. And they're very, they're very controlling of the experience of the learner. So to say, no, it's more like you're joining a network and there's a bunch of things that have to be consistent across that network, that took years to get them to ultimately accept.
So the vision of Parchment being a network, was that the original vision of the company, or was that something that you had to pivot into? Hindsight, it's, you can say, oh, well, that was the vision, but generally speaking, you're working with all these shareholders. You might have came in with one idea and left with another idea. What was that journey like?
It's a little difficult to believe, but no, that really was the vision, and things roughly proceeded. The piece that I didn't appreciate, which is the piece that DocuFi brought to the table, is a lot of my motivation. The concept of, is it a vitamin or is it a painkiller, right? If what I described to you was a vitamin understanding of Parchment, that we want learners to be able to collect and manage their credentials throughout their education and training journey, and we want credentials to be digital, and we want them to be higher fidelity records for admissions and employment. And that all matters. But that's a little bit of a vitamin. The painkiller was getting rid of paper. The painkiller was, automating a manual process, getting rid of paper, making it a lot more secure, a lot more efficient. DocuFi, which became Parchment, really began in that painkiller side of the house. It began as get rid of paper, make things electronic. And so that piece I didn't appreciate, how valuable just getting rid of paper is, which then gave us the permission to do the vitamin stuff of building the network and innovating the credential.
So from someone who's had decades of building software in education, you look great, by the way, right? For having multi-decades in education. What is the pain point now within educators? I read stuff on the news. I hear students aren't paying their loans because of that loan forgiveness. Enrollments are down. What are some of the things that you hear murmuring from in the educational community?
Yeah, I think it's a little different between K-12 and higher ed. When it comes to technology, I would say, the biggest topic, there's security and privacy, AI, there's a bunch of things out there. But a really big topic is just how fragmented things have become again. And we probably experience, you may as a parent, which I know you are from our conversation, my kids go to a class where I'm getting asked to enroll in a bunch of different things. There's Remind, and there's the LMS, and there's different learning applications, and parents don't want to be systems integrators. So I think there's an inflection point to come when the movement towards mobile computing and the empowerment of teachers to begin to adopt technology at the classroom level and not just wait for the school and district or the university, which is a good thing, that ballooning of the ed tech ecosystem begins to concentrate again so that there's a more cohesive experience and a more secure experience for students and families. But in general, I mean, in K-12, I tend to think the two biggest issues are math achievement. We saw math scores drop precipitously coming out of COVID, and that there is a math crisis in our country, and it's teacher retention and teacher qualification and teacher engagement. Teachers are under fire. There's a lot of performative politics in education, unfortunately, right now, and that distracts from the real issues like math education, like, teacher retention and engagement. Higher ed, what you noted, I would say, is probably the top issue, which is there's a demographic cliff coming in terms of just, the Great Recession and births. So we're heading into the lowest point of possible graduating high school students coming into higher ed. And then when you add to that this growing rhetoric around, is college worth it? And the increase in alternative credentialing pathways, like getting a Google certificate or what have you, you have a double whammy, a decreased percentage of seniors going straight into higher ed and fewer overall seniors, that percentage is calculated to. And that's particularly true of men, of boys. So there's a male crisis in higher ed where more and more campuses are 60, 65, 70% female, because where we've seen the drop in attendance and participation is male.
So when you hear the argument, is college worth it? What goes in your head?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hard stop. Yes.
So look, it's one of those things that how you study it, right? Like a lot of research questions, but the vast preponderance of research on the income that you generate, with a college degree over a period of time versus without would say it's worth it. 2, there's more to a higher ed degree than just income, right? There's being a good citizen, a good human. I know that it's out of vogue to talk about the value of a liberal arts education, but as a human, I think higher ed is worth it, in addition to as a potential worker. Now, is all of higher ed worth it? No, it makes no sense to spend $300,000 necessarily on a private degree in a degree major where a state institution could perform just as well for you. Your degree major matters a lot in whether higher ed is worth it. There's a lot more variation in outcomes at the level of the degree major than the college. We all tend to think your biggest choice is your college, but your biggest choice is your degree major at that college, right? A Harvard graduate, Harvard is, let's not use Harvard. Let's use, a Tulane, Vanderbilt, Tufts graduate in social work, versus Wyoming University, graduate in geology, right? It's the degree major that matters a lot more than the institution.
Are you seeing that students are, I don't know if the word's capable, but are informed enough to make degree decisions, at that age?
Are students capable? Well, first off, we have to remember that the view of most college students being 18 to 21-year-olds living in a dorm, that's not the majority of higher ed, in terms of age and life situation. But even if we look at just sort of that quote unquote traditional population, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I think institutions are trying to get better at showing it. The government is getting better at showing it with things like the college scorecard, which gets down to the degree major. I think cutting edge colleges are showing students kind of here's what the job market looks like for this particular degree major. Here's the payback period. But no, just as a typical parent, I have a junior. Is she 2 years away from making, the calculation we just talked about? Absolutely not.
Right. And, and I feel like it's one of those things, but whether that they're going to get more exposure to that than just sitting at home, right? Working at Starbucks, so, you're going to get more exposure from college. Is it optimal? No, but what institution in the United States is built for optimization? Not healthcare. So
yeah. But I can say it is something that colleges, are trying to do better, and it's an argument for not necessarily going straight into higher education, but having some experience so that when you make the investment, you're in the right field.
So Matt, now that we're coming to a close, a couple canned questions. What is your favorite book?
My favorite technology entrepreneurship book is an older book now called Accidental Empires. And it kind of talks about the early days of the PC industry, but I think it touches on concepts and an ethos that is very much true today. My favorite overall book is probably The Metaphysical Club, which is a philosophy history book about the rise of pragmatism, which is an American philosophical tradition.
Interesting. I'm going to write that one down. I'm reading the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance right now.
I've never read it, but it's one of those that you feel like you've heard it paraphrased. So
totally.
It's like
they classify it
Lewis.
as a philosophy book. So I'm like, okay. So I found it on my bookshelf. I was like, I guess it kind of is. Great. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for coming. Congratulations on the sale and best of luck on your next endeavor. I want in if you take early stage capital.
Well, you didn't see all the ups and downs along the way, but thank you. I have a great team that I've had a chance to work with, and appreciate you hosting the podcast and including me. Take care.
Everybody, thank you for listening. If you liked it, please subscribe. Tell a friend. We drop an episode every Tuesday, and we will see you next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Capital Stack Podcast. Make sure to share this with someone you know that can benefit from this content. Remember to support this show by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. David Paul is the founder and general partner at DWP Capital. All opinions expressed by David and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of DWP Capital. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. David and guests may maintain positions in the securities discussed on this podcast.